Nobody saw this coming. Not the coaches. Not the analysts. Not even the die-hard Eagles fans who study every single depth chart move like it's the stock market. Nobody looked at Cooper DeJean heading into this training camp and said, "Yeah, that guy right there, he's about to flip the entire script." But that's exactly what happened. And if you haven't been paying close attention to what's been going down at NovaCare Complex this summer, then buckle up, because what's unfolding in Philadelphia right now is one of the most fascinating, unexpected, and genuinely exciting stories in the entire NFL heading into the season. We're talking about a young man who walked into Eagles camp, and instead of quietly finding his footing, instead of slowly earning trust the way most second-year players do, he walked in and started turning heads. Started making veterans stop mid-rep and go, "Wait, who is this kid?" And then there's the offensive line. Oh, the offensive line. Because while everyone was buzzing about the skill positions, about the receivers, about the quarterback room, something was shifting up front. Something big. Changes were happening that most casual fans hadn't fully processed yet. Changes that could define whether Philadelphia contends for another Super Bowl run or gets knocked out early again. So today, we're going deep. We're going inside the walls of Eagles training camp. We're going to talk about Cooper DeJean's jaw-dropping emergence, the unexpected role that nobody predicted for him, and the offensive line shakeup that has everyone in Philly either excited or nervous, sometimes both at the same time. This is the story of a team being rebuilt in real time. A team that already won it all not long ago and now has to answer the most dangerous question in football. Can you stay hungry after you've tasted the mountaintop? Let's find out. First, let's set the scene. Because you can't understand what's happening right now without understanding where this team has been and where they think they're going. Philadelphia. The city of brotherly love. A city that breathes football like it breathes air. These are not casual fans. These are people who will debate a nickel package adjustment at a dinner table like their lives depend on it. Eagles fans are some of the most informed, most passionate, most emotionally invested fan bases in all of professional sports, and they expect results. They've been spoiled in recent years. They've watched this franchise reload, rebuild, and rise back up faster than almost anyone expected. They've watched Jalen grow from a question mark into one of the most dynamic quarterbacks in the league. They've watched a defense that can take over games. They've watched an offensive line that, at its peak, is considered one of the best in football. And they watched Super Bowl glory. They felt it. They lived it. So when training camp opens, these fans don't come in naive. They come in with expectations. They come in scanning the roster, studying the depth charts, watching every single practice rep posted online, trying to piece together the puzzle of what this team is going to look like when the lights come on in September. And this particular summer, two storylines started rising above everything else. Number 1, Cooper DeJean. Number 2, the offensive line. Let's start with Cooper DeJean, because honestly, his story deserves to be told properly. It deserves context. It deserves the full picture. Because when you understand where he came from and what he's been through, what he's doing right now at training camp hits completely differently. Cooper DeJean was born in Oldbolt, Iowa. And if you're not from the Midwest, you might be glazing over that, but stop for a second and really absorb it. Oldbolt, Iowa. Population around 900 people. This is a town where everybody knows everybody. A town where Friday night football under the lights isn't just entertainment, it's community. It's identity. It's the thing people talk about on Monday morning and plan for all week long. Growing up in a place like that shapes you. It gives you a certain kind of toughness that's hard to manufacture. A certain kind of hunger that comes from knowing you have to outwork everyone just to get noticed, because the talent evaluators aren't exactly flooding into Oldbolt on recruiting trips. DeJean played at the University of Iowa. And even there, at a Power 5 program, he was still fighting to get people to truly recognize how special he was. Iowa doesn't exactly produce the flashy highlight packages that get kids blowing up on social media. Iowa grinds. Iowa builds. Iowa takes raw football players and turns them into complete football players. And DeJean fit that program perfectly, because he had everything Iowa values. Toughness, intelligence, versatility, a nose for the ball. He was an All-American. He had a phenomenal college career. He returned kicks. He played corner. He played safety. He intercepted passes. He made plays that made scouts sit up straighter in their chairs. He was the kind of player that made evaluators call each other on the phone and say, "You watching this kid from Iowa?" And yet, the draft process is strange. It's unpredictable. And Cooper DeJean went through something during that process that most people don't fully talk about. During the pre-draft process, he suffered a hamstring injury that essentially wiped out his entire pre-draft evaluation season. No pro day. No combine workouts. None of the showcases that teams use to make their final decisions. Think about that. The moment when the whole country is supposed to be watching you perform, supposed to be falling in love with your athleticism, supposed to be getting that confirmation of what the tape already showed, that moment got taken away. Just gone. Because of a hamstring that popped at exactly the wrong time. A lot of players crumble in that situation. A lot of players see their draft stock crater. A lot of players spend months in draft limbo, wondering where they're going to land, wondering if teams are still believing in them or quietly moving on. Cooper DeJean didn't crumble. The Philadelphia Eagles traded up in the 2024 NFL Draft to select him in the second round. They didn't just draft him, they moved to get him. They saw through the injury. They watched the tape. They talked to the coaches in Iowa. And they decided that this kid from Oldbolt was exactly the kind of player they wanted in their program. And then, in a cruel twist of fate, his rookie season got derailed too. The hamstring came back. The injury that had already cost him the pre-draft showcase now cost him meaningful time in his first NFL season. He missed chunks of his rookie year. He was getting healthy. He was learning. He was doing the work behind the scenes that doesn't show up in the box score. But he was also sitting on the sideline, watching instead of playing. And watching instead of playing when you're a competitor, when you're the kind of person Cooper DeJean is, that burns. That eats at you. That fuels something inside you that builds and builds and builds. And when training camp opened this summer, that fuel came pouring out. Here's what makes what DeJean is doing so remarkable. It's not just that he's healthy and running around and making plays. Every player who comes back from injury talks about being healthy, talks about being hungry, talks about being ready. That's standard training camp language. What's different with Cooper DeJean is the role. Because when people thought about DeJean heading into this camp, they thought of him primarily as a cornerback. Maybe a nickel corner. A defensive back who could potentially develop into a solid starter at some point, with time, with development, with the natural progression of a young player finding his footing in the NFL. That was the projection. That was the expectation. Safe. Measured. Sensible. Nobody was saying, "Hey, you know what? This kid is about to become one of the most versatile and impactful defensive players on this entire roster." But that's exactly what's happening. In camp, DeJean isn't just lining up at one spot. He isn't just working through the corner rotation and competing for playing time in the traditional sense. He's being used in ways that the Eagles coaching staff clearly envisioned but kept quiet. He's lining up at nickel corner. He's sliding down to safety. He's being used in hybrid packages that challenge offenses to figure out exactly who they're supposed to be blocking, exactly who they're supposed to be running away from. He is, in the truest sense of the word, a chess piece. And the Eagles are moving him all over the board. The interceptions he's been picking off in camp. The passes he's been breaking up. The way he processes information at the line of scrimmage, reading the quarterback's eyes, feeling the route combinations, reacting before the ball is even out of the passer's hand. These are not things you typically see from a player heading into his second year who missed a significant chunk of his first season. Veterans on the Eagles defense are talking about him. Not in a polite, "Yeah, he's a good young player," kind of way. In a genuine, "This kid is something special," kind of way. The kind of conversations that happen between players who have been around long enough to know the difference between potential and the real thing. Coaches are finding reasons to keep him on the field. That's the clearest sign of all. When coaches start designing things around a player, when they start looking at their playbook and saying, "How can we get this guy in this situation? How can we put him in a position to make a play?" That's when you know something real is happening. DeJean is making those coaches think that way every single day in camp. Now let's talk about what this actually means schematically. Because this isn't just a feel-good story about a young player having a good camp. This has genuine, significant implications for how the Eagles' defense is going to function this season. Philadelphia's defense has been built on versatility. That's been the philosophy under their coaching staff. You want players who can do multiple things, because the modern NFL offense is too complex, too spread out, too multiple to counter with a defense full of one-trick ponies. You need chess pieces. You need players who can line up in different spots and still do their job effectively. DeJean fits that philosophy perfectly. He might be the most perfectly designed piece for that defensive puzzle. Think about what it means for opposing offenses when they can't figure out exactly what they're getting from the Eagles' defense. When they look at the formation and they see DeJean, and they have to decide, is he going to play man coverage over the slot? Is he going to play zone and drop back? Is he going to blitz? Is he playing safety depth? Is he matching up with the tight end? Is he following the receiver in motion? Every single one of those decisions changes the blocking assignment, changes the route distribution, changes what the quarterback does under center, changes the entire game plan. That uncertainty, that hesitation, is worth more than any single big play, because it gets in the quarterback's head before the ball is even snapped. And the Eagles are clearly starting to understand that DeJean, deployed properly, can create that kind of chaos every single week. There's also the special teams dimension. Remember, one of the things DeJean was celebrated for in college was his ability as a returner. His explosiveness. His vision. His instinct to find the crease and accelerate through it before the coverage unit even realizes where he went. In the NFL, great return ability is genuinely valuable and increasingly rare. Teams don't always want to put their best players back there on special teams because of the injury risk. But a player who can legitimately threaten to house a punt or a kickoff changes how opposing teams structure their coverage, changes the field position battle, can completely swing the momentum of a game. DeJean hasn't lost that ability. If anything, he might be even better at it now. Stronger, more confident, more experienced at reading blocks and using space. The Eagles have a player who can impact the game on defense and on special teams. In a league where rosters are 53 men deep and every position battle matters, having that kind of player gives the coaching staff extraordinary flexibility. But let's pause for a second on something important. Because when we talk about Cooper DeJean having a sensational camp, we also have to acknowledge the pressure that comes with that. The praise feels good right now. The highlights are exciting. The buzz is building. But training camp success and regular season success are two entirely different animals. In training camp, the lights are softer. The stakes feel lower, even though they aren't, not really. The opposing quarterback is often going through reads at 3/4 speed. The game plans are simplified. Players are still getting their legs under them, finding their rhythm. In week 1 of the regular season, everything changes. The speed is different. The precision is different. The consequences of every single play are real. A mistake in training camp gets coached up and forgotten. A mistake in a playoff game gets replayed 1,000 times. DeJean has shown the ability to process quickly. He's shown instincts. He's shown athleticism and football IQ. But the question that always hangs over young players is, can you do it when it counts? Can you do it when Patrick Mahomes is staring you down in a 2-minute drill with the game on the line? Can you do it when the crowd is roaring and the moment is massive? That's the question. And training camp, no matter how brilliant, can't fully answer it. But here's why Eagles fans should feel genuinely optimistic about Cooper DeJean. It's not just about what he's doing physically. It's about the mental makeup. Players who have been through what he's been through, the injury setbacks, the draft uncertainty, the rookie year frustrations, they either break under that weight or they build something stronger from it. Everything about the way DeJean has approached this camp suggests he built something stronger. He's not trying to prove himself. He's not playing nervous. He's not shrinking from contact or from competition. He's playing loose. He's playing fast. He's playing like a guy who has already made peace with the hard stuff and is now just here to play ball. That's not a minor thing. That's actually one of the most important qualities a young defensive back can have, because the position demands it. When you play corner, when you play in coverage, you are going to give up plays. That is the reality of the position. The greatest cornerbacks in NFL history have given up touchdowns. The question is always, how do you respond? How fast do you reset? How soon before you're playing the next play with full confidence instead of carrying the baggage from the last one? The early read on DeJean is that he responds well, that he resets fast, that he has the mental resilience to go with the physical tools. That combination, if it holds up, is how you get a franchise cornerstone. That's how you get a guy who's not just a role player but a genuine building block of a championship-caliber defense. Now let's shift gears. Because as electric as the Cooper DeJean story is, the other major storyline coming out of Eagles camp is the offensive line. And the offensive line in Philadelphia is not just a football story, it's almost a philosophical story. It's a story about identity. Because for a long stretch of time, the Eagles' offensive line was the story in the NFL. It was the standard, the measuring stick, the thing that every other team pointed to and said, that's what we're trying to build. Lane Johnson, Jason Kelce, the big men who paved the way. The unit that made Jalen Hurts' game look easy because they controlled the line of scrimmage the way bully teams are supposed to. Then Jason Kelce retired. And when Kelce walked away, it wasn't just a center position that opened up. It was a soul that left. Kelce was the heartbeat of that offensive line. He was the communicator, the protector, the guy making every single pre-snap adjustment, reading the defense, pointing and directing traffic so that everyone knew exactly where they needed to be. He was a future Hall of Famer, and everyone knew it, and now that spot had to be filled. Replacing a Hall of Famer is never simple. It's never clean. But the Eagles had to do it. They had no choice but to move forward. And now, heading into this season, the changes along the offensive line aren't just about one position. They're about reconfiguring the entire unit. Finding out what this line looks like in the post-Kelce era. Finding out who steps up. Finding out who the new leaders are. Finding out if this group can still be an elite offensive front or if those days are behind them. What's happening in camp right now is the process of answering those questions. And it's messy. And it's competitive. And it's fascinating. The center position is the nucleus of it all. Everything starts there. The center is the quarterback of the offensive line. He identifies the defense, makes the protection calls, and gets everyone aligned before the ball even moves. If your center is uncertain, if he's hesitating or making the wrong calls, the whole line struggles. It's a ripple effect that goes all the way out to the edges. So who steps into that role for Philadelphia? That competition has been one of the most closely watched battles in camp. Multiple players have taken snaps there. Multiple players have had their moments, good and bad. And what's become clear is that this isn't a situation where there's an obvious answer. This is genuinely open. This is genuinely competitive. Which is both exciting and slightly nerve-wracking, depending on your perspective. Exciting because competition always raises the level. Exciting because it means the coaching staff is being honest. They're not just handing a job to someone because of a name or a pedigree. They're making players earn it. Nerve-wracking because the center position is one where continuity matters enormously. Where chemistry with the guards, with the quarterback, with the entire operation matters. And chemistry takes time to develop. It doesn't happen overnight. It builds through thousands of repetitions, through communication, through trust. So the clock is ticking. Not in a dramatic crisis-level way, but in the very real way that every NFL team faces when September arrives and the real thing begins. And it's not just the center. The guards are going through their own competition. The tackles are navigating the dynamics of blocking schemes that may shift based on personnel. The entire unit is in a state of transition, which is completely normal for any team in any year, but is amplified in Philadelphia because of the standard that was set. Lane Johnson remains a cornerstone. When you have a player of his caliber anchoring one side of the line, it gives the entire unit a foundation. Johnson is one of the best right tackles in the league. Maybe the best, depending on who you ask. His experience, his technique, his ability to handle elite pass rushers is invaluable. And in a camp where there are questions and competition elsewhere, his stability is genuinely important. But the depth on this line. The developmental guys. The players fighting for spots and for starting opportunities, that's where the intrigue is richest. Because in today's NFL, depth is everything. You are going to lose starters during a season. You are going to need your fourth offensive lineman to come in and be functional. You're going to need your fifth to be capable of not being a liability. The Eagles are trying to build that depth even as they sort out the starting configuration. It's a lot to do at once. And training camp is the only time you can really stress test it before the games count. Let's talk about what the offensive line changes mean for Jalen Hurts. Because ultimately, that's the through line of everything up front. How does it affect the quarterback? Jalen Hurts is a unique quarterback. He's not a pocket statue. He's not a guy who wins purely with his arm from the pocket. He wins in multiple ways, with his legs, with his improvisation, with his ability to extend plays and create something out of nothing when the design breaks down. He's an elite competitor and a genuine leader of men. But he also takes hits. He also relies on his legs to make plays, which means he's exposed in ways that pure pocket passers are not. And when your offensive line is in transition, when communication is still being sorted out, when everyone is still getting comfortable with their assignments, the quarterback is in slightly more danger. The Eagles coaching staff knows this. They're aware of it. It's one of the driving reasons why the line competition is being taken so seriously. Because they can't afford to have Hurts taking hits because assignments are getting confused or protection is breaking down due to poor communication. What's been encouraging in camp is that Hurts himself seems comfortable. He's moving well. He's operating with confidence. He's not showing signs of a quarterback who is nervous about his protection, which tells you either that the line is coming together in ways that give him confidence, or that Hurts simply has the mental toughness to not let it show. Probably both. One of Hurts' most underrated qualities is his leadership inside the building. The way his teammates respond to him. The way he carries himself in practice. Serious, focused, competing at full speed even in situations where other quarterbacks might coast a little bit. He sets the tone. And when your quarterback sets that kind of tone, it elevates everyone around him. The offensive line, going through its own uncertainty, feeds off that energy from Hurts. They see him competing like it matters. They see him demanding the best from himself. And that creates a culture where the linemen want to be sharp, want to be right, because they don't want to be the reason their quarterback goes down. Now let's take a wider view. Because you can't fully appreciate what's happening in Eagles camp without zooming out and looking at the NFC landscape, looking at what Philadelphia is actually trying to compete against. The NFC is not getting easier. Not even a little bit. You've got the San Francisco 49ers, who have one of the most talented rosters in football when healthy. You've got the Dallas Cowboys, who perpetually believe this is their year, and this year they've added pieces to back up that belief. You've got the Detroit Lions, who have been building something genuinely threatening in the Motor City. You've got the Green Bay Packers with a young quarterback who keeps getting better. You've got teams all over the conference that believe they can compete. The NFC is brutal. Making the Super Bowl from the NFC is not a given for anyone. Not for Philadelphia, not for San Francisco, not for anybody. Which is why what DeJean is doing matters so much in the big picture. Which is why the offensive line decisions matter so much. Which is why every single depth chart move, every single competition in training camp, carries weight that goes beyond just who starts in week 1. The Eagles have to get this right. They have to come out of camp with a defense that can take the ball away, that can stop the run, that can confuse quarterbacks and create chaos. And they have to come out of camp with an offensive line that can protect Hurts, open holes for Saquon Barkley, and yes, Saquon Barkley is very much a part of this conversation, and give this offense the foundation it needs to be explosive. If both things come together, Philadelphia is a genuine Super Bowl contender. Not a pretender. Not a one-and-done playoff team. A team that can go all the way. That's what's at stake in training camp. That's why these stories, Cooper DeJean's rise, the offensive line evolution, are worth tracking with such intensity. Speaking of Saquon Barkley, let's spend some time here, because you can't talk about the Eagles' offensive line and what it means for this team without talking about what he brings to this equation. When Saquon Barkley signed with Philadelphia, it was one of the most significant running back signings in recent NFL history. Not just because of the talent, though the talent is obvious, overwhelming, the kind of physical ability that makes coaches rub their hands together with excitement, but because of what it signaled about the Eagles' philosophy. They want to be a team that can run the football. They want to be a team that can shorten games when they need to, that can control the clock, that can wear down a defense over 4 quarters. They want to be a team that doesn't have to put everything on Hurts' arm every single game, giving the defense and scheme flexibility to dictate the terms of engagement. Barkley is not a running back who needs perfect blocking to be effective. He's a running back who takes what the line gives him and creates things that shouldn't exist. He finds creases that aren't there. He turns 2-yard gains into 6-yard gains through pure athleticism and vision. He bounces runs outside, cuts back against the grain, and accelerates through contact in ways that simply exhaust defenses. But give Barkley an offensive line that's truly clicking, give him clean lanes, proper blocking angles, guards who win at the point of attack, and he can be legitimately unstoppable. That's the promise. That's the vision. That's what the Eagles are building toward when they work through these offensive line competitions in training camp. Because the line doesn't just protect Hurts. It unlocks Barkley. And when Barkley is unlocked, when he's getting the ball in space, in rhythm, with momentum, this offense becomes one of the most difficult things to game plan against in the entire league. So every single rep at center, every single guard rotation, every single run blocking assignment that gets mastered in camp, it all feeds directly into what this offense can become when the real season begins. Let's get back to the defense for a moment, because there's another layer to the Cooper DeJean story that we haven't fully explored yet, and it's the layer that might be the most exciting of all. What does DeJean's emergence do for the other pieces of the Eagles' secondary? Think about Darius Slay. Slay is a veteran cornerback who has been one of the most respected players in the Eagles' locker room. He's a former Pro Bowler. He's a player who has covered some of the best receivers in the NFL and competed at a high level year after year. But he's also not getting younger. And the Eagles have to manage how they use him, where they deploy him, how much they ask him to carry as the defense evolves. If DeJean can genuinely take over responsibilities in the slot, in nickel packages, in safety hybrid roles, it gives the Eagles tremendous flexibility in how they protect Slay. They can put him in more favorable matchups. They can reduce the total volume of coverage he has to handle. They can use his experience and positioning in ways that maximize what he still does well rather than constantly testing his limitations. That's smart roster management. That's a coaching staff that recognizes the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Think about Kevin Byard, a veteran safety who brings incredible experience and football instinct to the secondary. Byard reads offenses at a high level. He's a communicator back there. He makes the calls that keep everyone aligned. When you add DeJean as a versatile piece who can play multiple spots, Byard's job gets easier because he has more options around him. More flexibility in the defensive structure. More ways to disguise what the Eagles are actually doing. The Eagles secondary, at its best, operates as a unit where everyone's strengths are maximized and everyone's weaknesses are hidden. DeJean, healthy and performing the way he is in camp, makes that equation work better. He fills gaps. He covers up vulnerabilities. He gives the defensive coordinator, gives the whole coaching staff, options they simply didn't have before. Options are power in the NFL. The team with more options almost always wins. There's a phrase that NFL people use that I want to bring up here, because it applies perfectly to what's happening with Cooper DeJean right now. The phrase is, the light coming on. Coaches talk about it all the time. They talk about the moment when a young player, someone with all the tools, all the physical ability, suddenly starts seeing the game differently. When the chaos of the NFL slows down in their mind. When they stop reacting and start anticipating. When they go from processing the play to feeling the play. It's not something that can be coached in the traditional sense. You can put players in film rooms for thousands of hours. You can walk them through every tendency, every route combination, every pre-snap tell that quarterbacks give you. But eventually, the knowledge has to become instinct. The classroom has to become the field. The head knowledge has to flow into the body so naturally that the player isn't thinking, they're just doing. That transition, that moment when the light comes on, is what separates good NFL players from great ones. Everything coming out of Eagles camp right now suggests that the light is coming on for Cooper DeJean. His instincts are at a level that you don't normally see from second-year players. His processing speed, the quickness with which he identifies routes, moves his feet, gets his hands up in the right spot, it looks like an experienced player. It looks like someone who has played in this system for years, not months. That's remarkable. That's not normal development. And when you pair natural instincts with the physical ability DeJean has, the explosiveness, the change of direction, the ball skills, you start to see the potential ceiling. And that ceiling is high. Uncomfortably high for opposing offenses. Uncomfortably high in the best possible way for Eagles fans. Let's talk about the culture inside the Eagles building. Because that context matters too. Philadelphia has built something real in terms of organizational culture. They've built an environment where players believe in each other, where the locker room holds itself accountable, where the standard is set not by coaches yelling at players but by veteran leaders demanding excellence from everyone around them. When DeJean walks into that building every morning, he's walking into a place that breeds the kind of growth he's showing. He's learning from veterans who take their jobs seriously. He's competing against teammates who push him every single day in practice. He's being coached by a staff that believes in developmental progression and puts players in positions to succeed. That environment accelerates growth. That environment takes a player who might take 3 or 4 years to develop on a lesser team and compresses that timeline. It takes the raw material of Cooper DeJean's talent and applies the right pressure, the right friction, to shape it into something exceptional. This isn't an accident. This is design. The Eagles built their roster and their culture specifically to produce this kind of outcome. And now they're seeing the results. DeJean isn't just thriving at Eagles camp. He's thriving because he's at Eagles camp. Because this specific environment is exactly where a player like him needed to be to unlock his potential. Now I want to paint you a picture. A scenario. Because the best way to understand what all of this could mean is to see it in your imagination, to put the pieces together and feel what an elite game might look like when this all comes together on the field. It's a big game. Maybe a divisional round playoff game. The Eagles are at home. Lincoln Financial Field is electric. 69,000 people absolutely losing their minds. The noise so thick you can feel it in your chest. The atmosphere so intense that the visiting team's quarterback can't hear his own offensive lineman. The opponent has a dynamic offense. A spread system with multiple receivers who demand attention. A quarterback who is smart, accurate, and dangerous when he gets comfortable. A run game that can gash you if you commit too many resources to stopping the pass. First series. The opponent comes out in a spread formation, 4 wide receivers, 1 back. They're trying to see how the Eagles are going to match up. They're trying to find the favorable spot, the coverage they can exploit. Then they look at the Eagles' defense. And they hesitate. Because Cooper DeJean is out there. But where is he exactly? Is he in the slot? Is he walking down from safety? Is he about to blitz? Does he follow the motion receiver? Does he stay home? The quarterback looks left. Then right. He's going through his progression, but his eyes keep drifting back to wherever DeJean is lined up, because he can't figure out exactly what he's seeing. And that moment of hesitation, that fraction of a second where the quarterback isn't fully committed, is all it takes. The snap comes out. The ball goes to the slot receiver. But DeJean was in perfect position. He read it the whole way. He breaks on the throw before the ball is even released. And he's there. Right there. His hands come up. The ball hits them. Interception. Lincoln Financial Field detonates. The offense trots out. The Eagles have the ball backed up, short field to work with. Saquon Barkley gets the handoff. The offensive line, the newly configured, newly communicating, newly cohesive offensive line, fires off the ball in unison. The guard wins his block. The center controls the nose tackle. Barkley hits the hole, and then past the hole, and then he's into the second level with a full head of steam. And the Eagles are marching. That's the vision. That's what's possible. That's what Cooper DeJean's emergence, combined with the right offensive line configuration, can produce. It's not guaranteed. Nothing in football is guaranteed. But it's possible. It's genuinely, legitimately possible. Let's talk about what happens now. What are the remaining things to watch as training camp continues and the preseason gets underway? First, can DeJean maintain this level of performance when the game speed picks up in the preseason? Practice reps are one thing. Preseason games, where the opponent doesn't know your tendencies, where the physicality ratchets up, where the complexity increases, that's where you find out if what you're seeing in camp is real. Watch for DeJean in the preseason games. Watch not just whether he makes plays, but how he makes plays. Watch his positioning. Watch his eyes. Watch how he handles the first time a receiver gets a step on him, because that will happen, and how he responds matters more than the individual play. Second, Watch the offensive line combinations. Coaches are going to try different groupings in preseason. Different personnel. Different communication styles. Some combinations are going to look smooth. Some are going to look rough. That's normal. But by the time the preseason ends, the Eagles need to have a pretty clear picture of their starting five and the depth behind them. Pay attention to who is taking first-team snaps by the second preseason game. That's usually a strong indicator of where the depth chart is settling. Pay attention to how the run game looks, whether Barkley is finding creases or running into walls. The success of the run game is the best immediate diagnostic of how the offensive line is functioning as a unit. Third, watch the integration. Watch how DeJean works with the veteran members of the secondary. Watch how the communication looks between him and the safeties. Watch whether his versatility creates confusion for opposing scouts, because if the Eagles are deploying him in creative ways in preseason, that's a sign that the coaching staff is fully committed to this expanded role. These are the signs to look for. These are the indicators that will tell you whether the promise of camp is going to translate into impact when the real season begins. I want to take a moment to talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough in football: the weight of expectation. Philadelphia is a hard city to play in when things are going well. When things are going badly, it's one of the most demanding environments in professional sports. The scrutiny is intense. The criticism is loud. The fans don't hide their disappointment, they voice it loudly and clearly. For a young player like Cooper DeJean, entering a city with those expectations, coming off injury setbacks, trying to establish himself in a league that has chewed up and spit out far more highly touted players, the pressure could be crushing. But everything about DeJean suggests he handles that kind of pressure well. His background, growing up in small-town Iowa, competing at a major program where expectations are high and scrutiny is real, gave him the tools to manage pressure without letting it paralyze him. And the Eagles, as an organization, have gotten good at protecting young players from the noise while also preparing them for the reality. They don't shelter their players from the expectations. They acknowledge them. They talk about them. But they give players the tools to manage those expectations without being consumed by them. That combination, a mentally strong player in an organizationally supportive environment, is how you develop stars. Not just good players. Stars. The early read on DeJean is that he could be a star. A cornerstone of this defense for the next decade. Someone who, 5 years from now, Eagles fans look back at and say, "Remember when we weren't sure what we had there? Look what he became." That kind of player. That kind of impact. Let's circle back to the offensive line one more time, because there's a dimension of this that we haven't fully explored, the mental and emotional dimension. Offensive linemen are a brotherhood. They're the most team-within-a-team unit in all of football. They have their own language, their own culture, their own inside jokes and shared experiences. They eat together, they watch film together, they play cards together on road trips. They're 5 guys who have to function as a single unit, and that kind of cohesion doesn't just come from technique. It comes from trust. It comes from knowing the guy next to you is going to do his job, that he's going to have your back when things go sideways. When you change personnel on an offensive line, when you bring in new players, shift guys around, ask veterans to potentially take on different roles, you're not just changing assignments. You're asking people to rebuild trust. You're asking them to develop a new chemistry. That takes time. And it takes the right personalities. It takes people who are secure enough in their own abilities to be patient with the process. It takes leaders who can bring the group together rather than let individual frustration fracture the unit. From everything coming out of Eagles camp, that leadership is there. The veterans are setting the right tone. The new players are being welcomed into the brotherhood. The chemistry is building, maybe not as naturally or as quickly as it did in the Jason Kelce years, because Kelce was a once-in-a-generation kind of leader, but it's building. And sometimes the most meaningful bonds are the ones you have to work harder to forge. Sometimes the unit that has to figure it out together, that has to grind through the uncertainty together, comes out on the other side with something stronger than what they started with. The Eagles' offensive line has an opportunity to build exactly that kind of bond this season. And if they do, if they come out of camp and into September with that chemistry locked in, this could be one of the better offensive lines in football. Not the legendary unit it once was, not yet, but better than people might expect. Better than the cynics are predicting. Better than the outside world gives them credit for. There's one more thing I want to address before we start wrapping up. Because no story about a team heading into a new season is complete without addressing the question of what success actually looks like. What does success look like for the Philadelphia Eagles this year? The easy answer, the obvious answer, is another Super Bowl. That's the goal. That's always the goal in Philadelphia. Nothing less than a championship is acceptable. That's the standard. That's the expectation. That's the culture. But if we're being thoughtful about it, if we're being honest, success in the NFL is always more complicated than just win or fail. Success for Cooper DeJean looks like establishing himself as a genuine starter and impact player on this defense. Not a superstar overnight, but someone who plays meaningful snaps, makes meaningful plays, and shows the consistency that allows the coaching staff to keep expanding his role. Success for DeJean is proving that the injury setbacks were a detour, not a destination. Success for the offensive line looks like maintaining the Eagles' identity as a physical, run-game-centered offense while protecting Jalen Hurts at a high level. Success looks like keeping their quarterback upright, keeping their running back healthy, and controlling games when the situation demands it. Success for the team looks like being a legitimate postseason threat, a team that nobody in the NFC wants to see coming into the playoffs. A team that forces opponents to prepare specifically for them rather than treating them as a matchup they can win through generic preparation. And success in the biggest picture looks like a Super Bowl run. Because when you have the talent Philadelphia has, when you have Hurts, when you have Barkley, when you have a defense that can take the ball away, when you have an emerging talent like DeJean changing the calculus on defense, you're not just building to make the playoffs. You're building to go all the way. The beautiful thing about training camp, and this is something that never gets old, no matter how many years you follow football, is the pure possibility of it. Right now, in August, every team still has a chance. Every team is still perfect on paper. Every team is still building toward something. And the competition and the stories and the surprises that come out of these summer practices, they're the raw material from which a whole season is made. Cooper DeJean arriving at Eagles camp and stunning everyone with his versatility and instincts. That's a training camp story. But it's also potentially a season story. Potentially a playoff story. Potentially the beginning of a decade-long impact story. The offensive line in transition, sorting itself out, developing new chemistry under pressure, that's a training camp story. But it's also the foundation of whether this offense reaches its ceiling or falls short of it. These aren't just summer headlines. These are the building blocks of a season that has the potential to be something special. Philadelphia has done this before. They've been through the transition. They've been through the uncertainty. They've been through the moments where the outside world wasn't sure what to make of them, wasn't sure if they were truly a contender or just a team living on reputation. And then they've gone out and answered every single question on the field. Cooper DeJean is answering questions right now. Every practice, every rep, every interception, every pass breakup, every time he lines up in a new position and executes exactly the way the coaches drew it up, he's answering the questions that matter. And the offensive line is doing the same. Building, growing, answering the questions about their chemistry, their communication, their ability to function as a single unit rather than 5 separate players. So where does this leave us? It leaves us with a Philadelphia Eagles team that is, right now, one of the most intriguing teams in the entire NFL. Not because they're perfect. They're not perfect. They have questions. They have things to sort out. They have a depth chart that isn't fully settled and positions that haven't been decided. But intriguing, genuinely, deeply intriguing, because of the combination of what they already have and what they're discovering. Because of the veterans who still have something left to give. Because of the young players who are showing something real, something more than just promise. Because of a quarterback who leads with everything he has and asks nothing less from the people around him. And because of a second-year player from Old Iowa, a player who went through injury and uncertainty and the kind of obstacles that can derail a career before it even starts, who walked into Eagles training camp this summer and started making everybody stop and stare. Cooper DeJean is showing everyone that he belongs. More than that, he's showing everyone that he's something special. And in a city that demands greatness, in an organization that's built a culture around achieving it, in a moment when everything is still wide open and the season is still full of possibility. That's the most exciting thing imaginable. Stay tuned to what's happening in Philadelphia this summer. Because the DeJean story is just getting started. The offensive line story is just getting started. The Eagles' journey toward another championship run is just getting started. And if what we're seeing in training camp is any indication of what this team is capable of when the lights come on and the games count, this is going to be one heck of a season to watch.